think we see the room now. We can all wave.
All
Hello.
right. Good afternoon, commissioners, and back to you, Chair Harrington.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon portion of the Washington County Board of Commissioners work session for Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Thank you, everyone, for your flexibility. Our next topic is legislative update. We'll turn it over to you, GR team.
Cool. Let's do some introductions before we begin. For the record, Zakir Khan, Government Relations Manager, Washington County.
Pablo Nieves Valenzuela, Government Relations Manager.
Good afternoon, Carly Silva Gabrielson, Government Relations Manager.
All right, next slide, please. So just to provide an overview as to what we're going to be covering in today's presentation, we'll give you some session background, some background information that we've been able to gather, some legislative updates, and then next steps in the legislative process. Next slide, please. So just to provide some legislative sort of background in terms of where we are at, we're in week 3 of session. Thus far, we've seen there's been over 2,600 bills introduced. Many of them are placeholders. And we're being told that it might be as high as 4,000 bills that are launched before the first deadline. So we are expecting just to see a lot of issues come up throughout the session. In addition to that, some of the areas for likely focus for the legislature that we're already seeing is there are budgetary impacts to consider, especially in relation to what we're seeing happening on the federal level. There's housing and homelessness, substance use disorder treatment and funding, the education budget, and of course, the transportation package. And just one thing to recall is that the Democrats have retained supermajorities in the Senate and in the House. Next slide, please. So one of the prevailing themes that we've seen happen over the last couple of weeks is there's quite a bit of shock when the legislature started to see what was happening with the federal government. And almost immediately within that same week, contingency planning started being made within the Ways and Means process, as well as within state agencies. And there was previous reporting that this was happening in state agencies prior to the election, but more so, there's going to be some uniqueness to the session with state government trying to realize and see how the federal government funding freeze or less funds coming from the federal government may be impacting the state. And so that's something we're paying attention to within all of our portfolios to see how, what are the implications not only for our own asks, but for the overall state's budget. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so the first bill we want to call your attention to is HB 3180. This bill was introduced by Representative Sosa and would appropriate $1.25 million in matching state funds to Washington County for our courthouse replacement planning project. It was assigned to the House Judiciary Committee, and it has bipartisan sponsors from the Washington County Caucus, and we're working to get that scheduled for a hearing as soon as possible. Next slide, please. So on the next bill here, it focuses on allowing the use of funds from the Jail-Based Medication for Opioid Use Disorder Grant Program in facilities like our Community Corrections Center. This bill was assigned to the Joint Addiction and Community Safety Response Committee. The bill is HB 3009, by the way. And it is scheduled for a public hearing tomorrow around 5 p.m. Next slide, please. Great. So SB 236, this bill includes several policy changes related to HB 4002 from the last session. And if you remember, that is the bill that recriminalized possession of small amounts of controlled substances and created deflection programs, right? So this is kind of an omnibus bill that includes several changes to that bill. And it also includes the same language from HB 3009. We figured it'd be good to have it in two different vehicles in case it's easier to move one of them rather than the other. Sometimes it's easier to move a standalone bill versus a package, right? So it's also importantly going to be amended to include language directing the Criminal Justice Commission to create a new funding formula specifically for deflection. So this piece of the bill is really critical for ensuring that there's an open and transparent process for determining the funding counties will receive for deflection programs. It was introduced as a committee bill in the Joint Addiction and Community Safety Response Committee, and that means it cannot be sponsored by individual legislators, but it was co-chairs Przanski and Krupp who agreed to include those provisions. Next slide, please. So we are also holding on to LC 2056, which as currently drafted would create a task force to provide guidance to counties on the types of services that should be offered by libraries and examine how to ensure that there's sustainable and sufficient funding for counties to provide those services. And the reason we're holding on to that LC is because we're hoping to address these issues through an informal legislative work group. And if we're not able to do that, we can use this if we are able to do that, we can use this LC as a vehicle to implement recommendations from the work group. And if we're not able to get an informal work group started, we can focus on creating a formal task force or work group through that bill. So we have a few options there. We're working with a few legislators, including Representative Evans and Representative Chaichi and Senator Broadman as well. So with that, I think I'll pass it over to Zakir. Next slide.
So Senate Bill 610 is our bill that we are running for Behavioral Health Resource Network funding formula reforms. The board will recall in the summer there was an adverse decision by the Oversight and Accountability Council that left us and other counties shortchanged in terms of funding that was necessary for our Behavioral Health Resource Network. The bill is currently scheduled for a public hearing on February 26th. And I just want to call out that there's been a huge Washington County approach to this bill, from public health to behavioral health to even the ARPA team. We've just had a tremendous team working on this bill to get it crafted into formation. And so it focuses on three main areas, which is number one, building a new funding formula for the 26-29 funding cycle. Number two, creating a new process for how a funding formula gets created in the future, which includes requirements underneath the Administrative Procedures Act. And then three, there's a new advisory body that will be voting on the funding formula that includes more behavioral health officials, public health officials, a member of AOC, members of the Oversight and Accountability Council, Oregon Health Authority staff, and impacted community members, with 2 members of the legislature who are non-voting. And so we believe that this is a better body to come up with a formula in the future, because all of these entities are working together to make substance use disorder treatment more available all throughout our communities. Next slide. And then there's a couple of other priorities that I just wanted to briefly mention because they fit firmly within our legislative agenda. House Bill 3129 is a pipeline development bill. So this is really focused in on funding higher education and community colleges to promote workforce careers into the behavioral health field. So this is peer counselors, this is licensed professional counselors and therapists and social workers to go into the field with limited debt. And then House Bill 2224 is really focusing in on the professionalized workforce. So people that are currently in the field working, so people who are working for our community mental health programs. And so that's a $25 million ask, and that's to really incentivize them to continue to work in community mental health. House Bill 2202 is focused on reducing administrative burden. And this is a process that OHA underwent with the Association of Community Mental Health Programs to look at what are the statutes that really don't need to be utilized anymore in terms of documentation purposes. And so this would improve the amount of time that a practitioner could spend directly with a client rather than doing sort of too much paperwork. And then the final bill listed on here is House Bill 2056. Over the last sort of months, the Association of Community Mental Health Programs was able to undertake a cost study bill to determine the true cost for aid and assist and civil commitment services throughout the entire state. And that cost study came back with essentially that there's a $64.8 million gap over the biennium that is necessary to fill so that the services that counties and community mental health programs provide is fully funded. And that, as you know, fully funding the services that we provide is firmly within our legislative agenda. So this is a major priority. Next slide.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'd now like to direct your attention to development of the 2025 transportation package, which the work is currently underway. As you all know, the last time that a transportation package was taken up by the legislature was 2017. So we find ourselves now 8 years later with a significant amount of work to address, including a robust backlog of operations and maintenance across the state. The past few weeks, the Joint Committee on Transportation has been reviewing the findings from the summer work groups, the 3 work groups that commenced over the summer, and also spending time providing education to new members of the committee. Package details are being developed, and conversations both in the committee and in private reflect a shared commitment from committee chairs and vice chairs to address the backlog of operation and maintenance and expand revenue sources. I'm also pleased to share that there have been a very robust bipartisan focus on maintaining the 50-30-20 investment split and a lot of positive conversations and testimonies surrounding the good work that local jurisdictions do with that funding. And finally, there really is a focus on having a package that is bipartisan, at least at the onset. So we are currently expecting to see contours of a draft package released in mid-February to early March. So stay tuned for more on that. Next slide, please. Now shifting attention to another significant area of my portfolio, housing. We are seeing dozens of bills that have been filed with the goal of expanding housing options and to help make Governor Kotek's housing production goal of 36,000 homes a year a reality. Many bills are currently serving as placeholders. However, work is underway to analyze the impact of key bills on department planning staff and overall housing outcomes. A few bills that we are currently tracking is one is HB 2968, which would create a fund for local governments to defer system development charges if a new developer is delinquent. And also a bill that would expand allowable middle housing and housing requirements to include urban and incorporated lands, all of which have significant impacts on land use planning and our county staff. So we will continue to work with our subject matter experts and Housing Coalition to monitor these bills as they come up and really analyze the impact to county and to overall housing outcomes. Next slide, please. Something else that you'll remember from this short session is the effort to develop a statewide process for the foreclosure sale surplus that some counties find when properties are sold that go through a foreclosure process. The summer work groups resulted in 3 bills that were filed this session. As currently written, all 3 bills need a significant amount of work, and we stand in opposition to all 3 bills. However, there is a strong coalition that has developed to focus surrounding HB 2089, which is a bill that we're calling the Look Forward bill that would really focus on setting that process for counties to handle these proceeds. We're working on a series of amendments with AOC with the goal of evolving the bill to get it to a place where we can consider support, but frankly, it needs a lot of work for counties to be able to consider supporting this legislation. So we will continue to work with committee chairs and bill sponsors to, again, hopefully evolve that bill to a place of support. Next slide, please. Wonderful. Regarding our bill to streamline the requirement to hold a public hearing for 100% consent-based special district annexations, currently known as HB 2355, discussions surrounding a detail of this bill are ongoing, and we're continuing to seek a path forward this session. However, if we're unable to advance a bill that meets the needs of the county and department staff, we will reconsider our overall strategy and timing. With our ultimate objective of passing a goal that really achieves our needs for streamlining this small detail of annexation petitions. And I'll click through to the next slide and pass it back over to my colleague, Pablo.
Thanks, Carly. So this slide is just focused on our next steps here. So on the 25th of this month, we will be back presenting to you all. That also happens to be the deadline for introducing bills. With some exceptions, of course, in the legislature, there's always an exception, right? And then on March 10th, we are tentatively planning that as our county day at the Capitol, where we hope to set up meetings between you and our Washington County delegation to discuss legislative priorities. And then March 18th, we will again be back here to present to you all. And 3 days after that, on the 21st, is the deadline to schedule work sessions in the first chamber. So it's a pretty major deadline. I think we all, we're all really focused on making sure we get our priorities through that deadline. And then, I guess we'll go to the next slide, and if there's any additional, any questions at this point, then we're happy to answer. Thank you.
Sort of boggles my mind as to why you would organize the board day at Salem to be the same day as an AOC afternoon.
I appreciate the feedback on that, Chair Harrington. We were really struggling to find a date that worked with the schedules of all the commissioners, and also try to find a strategic time. We thought that although there are AOC meetings that day, that there would still be sufficient time for us to schedule meetings. But certainly, if that's something you all do not want to do, then we can look at other
Well, right
options.
now you're holding the whole day.
Well, so I in my communication with county staff, I've been clear that we do not plan to schedule you all during, for example, the AOC Legislative Committee meeting and other meetings like that. I think there's some time in the mornings when there should be time for commissioners to meet with legislators. We also don't plan to have the entire board in meetings with each legislator. We were planning to split folks up into smaller groups. So I think that was how we were planning to schedule around that.
You might want to update your calendar event message then.
Okay, thank you, Chair Harrington.
I have a question. Thank you for the presentation. On page 10, it's about bills that are related to behavioral health, I believe. I didn't see a bill here around licensing and some of the issues that we've talked about previously in relationship to making it easier to get clinicians into the field. Is there anything out there right now?
Yeah, thank you for that, Commissioner Treese. We really appreciate the question. So actually, many of those bills just came out this week. And so we're still trying to get a track on all of the bills that are included within that package. And it's also a matter of timing. We believe these bills are going to be heard sort of towards the beginning of March, and then the licensure bills are going to be heard later in March. Currently, the House Healthcare Committee is really focusing in on pharmacy benefit managers and then some public health components, with behavioral health to be coming in March.
Okay, well, I like seeing HB 3129, the workforce piece, and I just was worried about the licensure. So thank you.
Thank you. And we'll definitely include those bills on the bill tracker for all of you.
Great.
Any other commissioner questions?
I had heard that there was going to be some conversation about TLT money being expanded to possibly be used for public safety. Was that just kind of background chatter, or was there anything real?
I think we'll have to follow up with you on that, Commissioner Willie. Thank you for the question. Yeah, was that? Yeah, I don't want to say anything that I'm not sure of, so we'll be sure to follow up with you via email.
Well, there's only 2,400 options you got up there, so I mean, you could make one up, and nobody would know for a while. So
I'm pretty sure I know the bill that you're talking about, but we'll follow up and make sure we get you accurate information.
all right.
That was just going to be my observation, is just how much is going on and at what speed.
Yeah,
it's obvious, but
I'll start. I think it probably kind of varies a little bit depending on our portfolios. I think in my portfolio, I think things are actually moving relatively, I wouldn't say slowly, but I also wouldn't say quickly, at a pretty deliberate pace. Two of the bills, as I mentioned, SB 236 and HB 3009 are scheduled for hearings tomorrow. So in a way, I guess those are moving somewhat quickly. But but beyond that, I think there's a lot of work being done still on bills. I think a lot of things were kind of introduced in an incomplete form, right? And so I guess the benefit of that is it gives us an opportunity to help kind of workshop bills with colleagues and get them into a better place. But of course, these deadlines can sneak up on us, so we want to make sure that nothing gets left behind. That's a priority.
Yeah, and just to further Pablo's point, what we're seeing is that there are a lot of placeholders that are very clearly responses to the federal government that still don't have language within them. And so I think people were taking a wait and see approach to see what the federal government does before launching kind of full-fledged versions of their own bills. And so we can't see the full picture yet. I think that's why there's about 2,000 bills in queue, because many of those are responses to things that are in formation. And so that's one of the things that we're just not able to fully identify yet until kind of all of the bills are out in public. And that changes on a daily basis. We're getting new bills that are launched like in the hundreds every single day. I would say in terms of my portfolio, what we're seeing at least from the Senate Labor and Business Committee is that there's some bills that have come up that are definitely flags for local governments, definitely create unfunded mandates. And so we're working on catching those and responding in opposition to those. There's one that's actually out for a public hearing tomorrow that we're working with the Association of Portland Counties on.
One area that I've been concerned about is around assessment and taxation. And as we've talked in prior GR meetings, getting the level of coverage by the state increased. Do you know if that made it into a filed bill?
Yeah, so there is a committee bill that is actually just introduced today that is in collaboration with the Association of Oregon Counties, and we've been consulted on that, and that should address the issue. It's kind of a package of various funding mechanisms that would improve funding for assessment and taxation services that counties offer. So we're pretty excited about that. It's being introduced as a committee bill by Representative Nathanson.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fye, you have a question?
Yes, Chair Henton, I do. Thank you. And is my audio okay this time?
So far, so good. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. It was technology era, not a user era. So,
Your question,
but
please.
and I want to appreciate the IT staff for helping me problem solve. Mark Fisher, thank you so much. I think my question is to Pablo. Pablo, it might be to you, but I'm wondering about the other civil commitment House bill that's out there that was started out as a legislative concept from NAMI and turned into, I think, a House Bill 2467. Is that something you intend for Washington County to weigh in, or is there more information to come about that bill? And I think it's pending to come to AOC Health and Human Services, maybe. So I wanted to see where we are on that bill. You don't have to answer to me right now. We could just, reach out and connect. But I think it will
Since you
be.
brought it up in work session, Pablo, do you have an answer?
So I do not have, we haven't weighed in at this point. So I'd be happy to follow up with you and get you some more information on that bill. Right now, it hasn't been scheduled for a public hearing yet, but it has been assigned to the Judiciary Committee in the House.
I would like those updates too, please, Commissioner Snyder.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Anything else, Commissioner Fye? Your hand is still raised.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. I will lower it. No, I'm done.
Okay. Any other commissioner questions? Okay, well, I have a question for all the commissioners. Monday, March 10th. Who here is planning on attending the AOC Governance and Revenue Committee? I had only been attending those based upon what was happening with assessment and taxation, as well as courthouse planning. So it has depended on the agenda and the progress of bills. So I'm not hearing Anybody else have
Planning on.
plans?
Saying too, and I had held the day for,
Okay, the 8 a.m. Transportation and Community Development Committee.
That's the committee that I'm on.
Okay. Health and Human Services, Commissioner Fye. Anybody else? Board of Directors, that'd be me. AOC Ledge, that'd be me and Commissioner Treese. Okay, so
I
that's
as well. I as well, Chair Harrington.
for the Ledge.
For the ledge, yeah, as a co-chair of the Health and Human Services.
Okay. I stand by it. Just March 10th just doesn't make sense to me. So. Okay, seeing no other questions on the government relations presentation, I think we're done with that topic.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okie dokie.
Go forth and be productive or do something.
Sounds good.
We will.
We'll move on then to the next topic, bicycle facility selection for Alexander Street Improvement Project. Am I looking
I
at
did
the wrong
you
agenda?
You missed the quarterly
Yeah,
management
quarterly.
report from
Oh,
Tanya.
you're right.
We skipped right over Tanya.
As I
Sorry.
moved my papers around from this morning. Thank you. Quarterly management report. Thank you very much.
And I do want to just note, it is recognized that the GR team noise in the room they were in Salem, I'll call it tingy. It sounded tingy. They'll be problem solving that with IT to determine what solutions, because this is the first time that we've seen or received that type of sound, and IT couldn't problem solve it just on the spot.
They were probably using the mic from the laptop.
We're at the start of long session, so it's the time to figure that out.
That's why I use one of those little speakers. It eliminates the tin.
Yeah. So apologize for any of our individual noise sensitivities that we may experience. So board, here today to walk through the quarterly management report, and this is for Q1, 2025. I went almost backwards in time. As a reminder, this report is broken into following elements: opening message, recap of organizational cross-functional goals, bodies of work I want to highlight in the 5 primary areas of government, link to the department work plan dashboard, and then closing comments. I will not spend time on this slide. We have referenced this in previous roundtables. This is just a reminder of how to read the status bars in the department work plan. So some key highlights from this quarterly management report is there are several bright spots from the reporting period in our department work plans. We've seen great strides in modernizing our IT systems, hitting some key milestones in the journey of the replacement of our enterprise resource planning system, also called the ERP, which also has included design of our employee portal, our employee intranet called Horizons. For the board and community's awareness, our first priority was redesign of the community-facing website, and then we went internal to our Horizon site, which employees and the board can access. We're continuing to work through our broadband users group bug on an internet path modification, and this is part of our internet resiliency, so we don't have downtimes that we've experienced more significantly over the past few years. We continue our strong commitment to community through increasing housing stability and community access, and you will see that later in the report, focusing on SHS. Further, we are hitting milestones in community correction services with increased contacts, meeting statewide mandate requirements. 5 areas of focus. Before launching into the 5 areas, I want to remind the board of the 4 cross-functional goals. One, communications assessment, which is intended to assess the organization's current structure and support for its communications function, and to recommend improvements using a One Washington County approach. Recommendations are currently being evaluated with a goal of a multi-year implementation plan. 2, employee and community engagement. This project intends to engage Washington County employees and community members in reoccurring surveys. So separate employee engagement surveys, and then also community engagement, or community, also called community polls, that your board has been requesting to gauge levels of satisfaction, perceived effectiveness, and impact across Washington County portfolio of services and goals. I should note that within the county, as far as surveying employees, we have many departments that do surveys. Some departments do surveys for specific grant requirements, but we at this point do not have a One Washington County approach to employee engagement surveys. A limited duration ARPA position was filled in HR, and DHM Research was awarded a contract for 2 community surveys, which have also been funded by your ARPA allocations. Those dollars were obligated. Transitions in leadership have impacted some of our professional learning and development plan goal and procurement goal updates. Those updates will be further expanded upon in your spring management report. So now let's move on to focus areas. And as a reminder, this is an opportunity to highlight progress in different areas of the organization with high impact. So first, SHS, and we've been talking quite frequently about SHS, so some just high-level highlights. It's been another busy quarter. In December, the Beaverton Shelter opened its doors officially. Under construction currently is Project Homeless Connect Center and Just Compassion Resource Center. We've proudly funded 2 transitional housing projects to bring forth 119 recovery and stabilization units. Open Door also received funding to build an access center in Cornelius. On a heavier note, the December SHS revenue projection shows revenue collections are down this year as forecasted. Moving on to WCCLS, as your board was just briefed on the WCCLS levy, the funding and governance project remains on track. After multiple in-depth sessions with library directors, city managers this fall, facilitated by Marina and Company, our city and nonprofits had reached the recommendations that were brought to your board earlier today. Staff will be presenting recommended base level of services for the whole cooperative, cost assessment for those base services, and levy rate that will support the base service levels based on your direction today. The Library Levy Steering Committee continues to meet and work with EMC research, and polling began last week. As shared with your board at the work session on January 14th, libraries will be polling on 2 rates, 10-cent increase over our current rate and 22 per 1,000, as well as 15 increase over current rate. The Public Safety Local Option Levy Project is on track. The Public Safety Levy Steering Committee continues to meet regularly to understand more about the continuum of public safety services delivered to the community, the current service level, and the financial impact of continuing service level and the cost of potential new investments. Over this last quarter, the steering committee, in partnership with EMC Research, the contracted public opinion research firm working with Washington County on both our public safety and library levies, completed the review and drafting of the first polling survey. That survey was launched and completed in the community between December 3rd and December 12th. Of note, the survey tested the possible replacement of the current levy rate to 65 cents per 1,000 of assessed value, which would be an 18-cent increase over the current levy rate. Jail capacity. The jail capacity and community corrections expansion study continues to work with Matrix, the consulting firm on the project. The timeline will be adjusted and communicated during this current quarter as more information is gathered. Moving on to ARPA, and this is within the primary area of LUT and economic development. Washington County received 117 million in ARPA state and local fiscal recovery funds. The U.S. Treasury required all funds to be contractually obligated by December 31st of 2024 and fully spent by December 31st of 2026. Really proud to share that all investments approved by the board in the ARPA 23-26 framework have successfully been obligated by their respective budget allocations by that deadline. That was a huge milestone for us to achieve, as not all governments were able to do that. And I just want to underscore, the county did not turn back any ARPA dollars. We did not turn back any CARES dollars. So we are putting all of those dollars here to work in our community. These obligations include large capital improvement contracts that may receive additional funds if there are other investment areas do not spend their entire budgets. Moving on to Washington County assessment and taxation. We're going to dive a little bit deeper in the area of assessment and taxation during this quarterly report. This depiction draws your attention to the assessment and taxation summary, describing how the county's portfolio of properties increased to 197 billion, resulting in 1.559 billion in levied revenue. These tax revenues are distributed to 64 taxing districts as they are collected. Notably, Washington County receives 16.3 of the total revenues. This is something that our public sometimes misunderstands. While the county is responsible for collecting those dollars, we then distribute to the 64 taxing districts and only retain the 16.3%. I do want to also underscore that the county does pay for those costs of collection on behalf of those taxing districts as well. The dollar in this slide depicts revenue distribution by major category. Classification and compensation update. This was a priority that your board had authorized one-time funds in this current fiscal year. The class and compensation, not confiscation, team, which is comprised of our HR experts, has been partnering with department leadership and employees to document the amazing work performed by our employees across the county. And so this started with actually developing job descriptions. This is the first time Washington County has had actual job descriptions for each position. To date, 1,100 job descriptions have been received, and so this is a significant work effort that is underway. Through the project, Classification Comp will partner to handle many of the tasks and gathering information on our future state. The target date for this project is June 30th of 2025. I want to say part of why we're moving forward so quickly, and the board has heard, I just saw some facial reactions, so I'm going to kind of underscore, and this is not eloquent, but as we move forward with updating our enterprise resource project planning system, our IT system, we don't want to put garbage in, garbage out. And so by having good HR information in will help us with final end projects. So that is why we are focusing on this big push. That does not mean once we get to the end of the class and comp study that we will be at implementation. Many times the study results yield a 3, maybe even 5-year implementation plan, because this is the first time to staff's knowledge that the county has undergone a full comprehensive study. After the study is complete, it is best practice to update class and comp study on an every 3 to 5 year basis. So what we're undergoing right now, and I will say the significant workload will prove dividends in setting that pace in the future. Your board has seen this slide before. I just want to underscore that this is an evolving management report to make sure that it meets your board's needs, and also I will be honest, to also reflect our staff capacity. Last week was a huge curveball in what we were able to achieve in putting into this report, and I expect with our staff constraints, we will have to manage your expectations and align them very closely with what we can achieve from staff in producing this report. As a reminder, the next quarterly management reports will be coming to your board on May 6th, and then following May 22nd. Those are tentative dates. As we enter the 2025-26 fiscal year, the organization work plans, and this is just a reminder, we talked about this at the roundtable, will shift from department-specific work plans towards larger organizational priorities, which align back to your strategic plan update. As an organization, we'll identify those limited number of multi-year priorities, such as fiscal sustain. I don't want to say such as, I'm going to actually say which will include fiscal sustainability, employee engagement, and development or modernization of systems and processes. As we make this shift, departments will develop at least one goal demonstrating how their department's role is specifically aligning with those organizational priorities. Once this happens, your board will see the changes in how your quarterly report will reflect those organizational priorities. As a reminder, we align our work planning with your budget calendar. So once you adopt the budget, then we'll be relaunching the annual work. And then in closing, here's just a reminder of the reporting periods of the management report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? I think Commissioner Treese has none. Commissioner Snyder?
I don't. I mean, there's just, again, I made this comment about the state legislative, there's just a lot of work happening. And I appreciate all of that.
Commissioner Willie?
Yeah, same thing. It's a good recap of, because we kind of take this, we get fed this a lot every day. And so it's good to recap this, put it concise like the way you did it. So it's a lot of work.
Commissioner Fye?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Tanya. This is a very well put together report. I feel like every time we do these quarterly management reports, keeps getting better and better. So thank you. And I'm going to be off camera for a little bit, but I'm here listening.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead. And then I got something to say at the end, so go ahead.
is it still on this topic?
Yes.
Then go ahead.
Well, I was just noticing that your next report is May. And then the one after that is in July. And considering the amount of work that we've got to do from now until July, basically, would it be, as a suggestion, easier for you to consolidate the next 2 quarters and present 2 quarters in July so that you didn't have to present a quarterly report when we're in the middle of budget season? So I don't know how much time this spends, but I'm imagining it's pretty considerable. So could we help by taking that off the plate and sliding it to July? I need to know that if this is significant, then let's consider it. If you say, no, I did it in 25 minutes this morning before the meeting, but I know better than that. So, I mean, could we do that?
So I want to turn this back to a board discussion on what type of reports you want from me as a county administrator. The request for a quarterly management report actually came from your board. So this is where I want to make sure that I'm meeting your board's expectations of me and also our departments and staff.
Well, I think we hear from you a lot in every work session. And so, and I didn't see anything in here that was new to me. So um, I guess I'd like us as a board then to consider giving you a pass in the next quarter and having a 6-month update in July.
Can we put a pin on that for a moment
Sure.
and come back to
And
it?
I didn't mean to come out of the clear blue with that either. I should have said something in advance.
So I'll go with my questions and comments. So thank you for this report. While we get communication of all sorts, some of it verbal, some of it through email, some of it through one-on-ones about the state of things from one week to another, I would just like to note that things have been many projects of board focus have been in quite a state of flux. I'm the board liaison to the Jail and Community Corrections project, and this is the first time I've heard that we will definitely be getting a new timeline before the end of this quarter. I haven't gotten an update since we had the October meeting, and then the update I've gotten is we're waiting to hear back from Matrix in December. And here we are the first week of February. So what our POR is for fiscal year 24 is not clear to me. I don't know what projects are absolutely following through on their timeline. This report made it much clearer to me this week than I had last week. But we had wanted to get a cadence in since things were in flux. So if we skip a quarter, then that means that we go through budget not knowing what is going to be done.
I think it's
in this current-
important to acknowledge that, like, to your point, like, to me, we do live this every day. And yes, there are things that occasionally we learn and might, we get a reconnection on. We live all this, but many members of our community and the public at large don't. And I think this kind of summary also provides them with information and transparency
Clear
around the
snapshot.
bigger picture and the way everything's kind of working together, that, we may not be the only audience for this. And I think that's important to acknowledge.
That's a good point.
So it provides that snapshot. So having a quarterly cadence, and I was told that not all departments got their information into this, though I didn't hear that said today. But it was told to me as one of 5.
Chair, since you brought that up, I can underscore there. If you look at the work plan, the dashboard, you will see the last updated date. There are some updates that department just due to their workload couldn't get in. So those will be updated in the next quarterly report. And that was just because of capacity. And we had to push this out the door. And so that there's a general reality. So for me, I want to say I appreciate the question from skipping a month. I want to make sure that the structure and the content is right, because while this budget season is going to be hard, I'm just as concerned about the next quarters, because we are going to have, frankly, a reduced size Washington County. So to me, it's about, is this the right scope and getting to that so that I can put in, and you've heard me say, a business rhythm, a business cadence, and that's helpful for our direct departments too. It's that consistency and then implementation of that consistency.
Okay. Thanks for that. So back to my comments and questions. So on slide 11, if we could go back to that, please. Thank you. So we heard testimony at our board meeting today, taking a portion of our strategic plan update, which relates to the organization structure that responds to the strategic direction and citing information out of that as though the organization structure is the strategy.
Mhm.
And so I just want you to hear that your organization, the way you choose to structure your organization to manage the portfolio of responsibilities is just that,
Mhm.
an organizational structure. And I have never interpreted that section of the strategic plan as a strategy. It's rather how we structure our workforce and our service needs for efficiency as an organization serving the public. I wanted to share that and checkpoint it with you and with my colleagues to make sure that I'm using the strategic plan correctly.
Yes, and if I can just dive into the public testimony today, and it was regarding sustainability and climate. Um, uh, Washington County is committed to sustainability and climate actions. That is seen through many of our department work plans and actions. Most specifically, within our Health and Human Services Public Health Division, utilization of public health modernization dollars directly from the state. Staff are currently working on a board update for you, which I don't have a specific date. I will just say within a month, generally, give or take, that you will receive that update. For us to be able to work within our limited resources and truly embody a One Washington County, we cannot conduct our work in silos. And so that means it gets a little bit blurry. That testimony that you heard today, I will just say, as we go through the really hard choices that we collectively are going to be faced to ensure that we ultimately your board adopts a balanced budget, we really need to lean in that One Washington County vision to make sure that we are continuing to make sure that Washington County is a livable community.
Thank you. The other thing that in reading this fiscal year Q2 quarterly report and sitting through the presentation, I've been reflecting upon there are those things that organizationally we can control, those things we can influence, and those things that we're affected by, but we have neither control or influence on. So, for example, with the government relations update that we just got, we can control our agenda, our focus list, and we've have quite a hefty list of needs that we've adopted as part of our state legislative agenda. And yet, one thing that I've internalized from this latest legislative session is that this newest legislature has not been prudent at all about the number of bills that legislators have advanced. And a few of us heard this at the town hall with Senator Solomon, Reps Sosa, and McLean last week. And so that means that, you know, our team is trying to wade through all of that. And it's like, yeah, no. I mean, we've been through this multiple times before. And yet I understand the situation our great team is in. They're on the lookout for bad bills as well, right? But this is where I think we're going to have to help support them in staying focused on what our needs are and look to AOC to figure out which are the bills that are going to get traction, which are bad bills, versus trying to do it all themselves and then just use AOC for those things that maybe we have in common. Let's see. The other thing on that control, influence, and affected by is we tried to prepare ourselves for a new president and a new administration, right? The good news is he told us what he was going to do and how he was going to make things happen. But I'll say I was surprised by the speed at which he effectuated that, despite President Trump saying before he was, or the day of his inauguration, he was going to use the power of his pen, right? So I'm very proud of the way our leadership has organized itself to try and figure out what these latest executive orders, though I haven't seen written, what was the word that began with the letter R? Rescinded. I haven't seen a written decision that it's been rescinded. But I can trust. But we do know it will, I think we should expect that it will continue to be very uncertain. And so this leads to your idea of how can we ensure that our staff hears the support, that yes, we recognize that there does need to be some flex, some capacity to ride these waves of uncertainty. And I don't know the answer to that, other than I think we need to perhaps use some of our roundtable time in February and March and identify which of our focus areas we have to close on. We know we have to approve a budget. We know we have to go to the ballot with our 2 levies. But what other things do we have the right? We have money and we have time, right? We have a lot of constraints on money, but how can we stretch time, knowing that it will affect certain things, but nonetheless, where can we hold to certain plan of record is the term I use. How can we hold to certain things, and where can they be flex in others? Because I know I'm one of 5 board members who wants to ensure that our workforce feels supported and valued, because I know we all do. So I think we have an opportunity to revisit this information as well as our focus list for the year and go, right? And start to question and then come back to it in March and in a manner to provide Ms. Angie and Ms. Duke-Dreesen with some guidance on where we see that flux just as a board. And then they'll have other ideas for us as well. So those are just my ideas for how we navigate the times we find ourselves in. Thank you for the idea and for us having the discussion about what it might mean or not. We might need to do that in the future.
I think that's a great point though, Jason made. Thank you for that.
I'm going to bring us back to the narrative that was in here, just for me. In reading the portion on tax and assessment, I realize I need a briefing and I need a clear understanding of, why our real market value goes at an angle like this, why our assessment is here, how, just so that I'm aware of what our opportunities are and those types of things. So it's interesting how bits of your report here are speaking to different commissioners in different ways. And I just want you to know that for me, that particular point, there's a lot of value there. So, and it's not like I haven't heard it before, but I think when the pain gets greater, you start to look for, what does that mean? And how can, do we have the right number of assessors? Do we have the process in place?
It was intentional that that was included.
So did I get the point?
Yes.
Yeah, I got the point. Oh, I'm so glad. So,
All righty. Well, I don't see Commissioner Fye on camera and I don't see anything else here in the room. So thank you very much for this quarterly update and we'll move on to our next topic.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hey, we're back.
Great.
Thank you for having us. For the record, I'm Stephen Roberts, Director of Land Use and Transportation, and I'm joined by Russ Knoble, is our Capital Project Services Division Manager. And I want to acknowledge in the room, Patrick Oakes is with us. Patrick is the Senior Project Manager who's overseeing the Alexander Street project. Okay, so we are here to talk about a bike facility. So a quick review of our purpose. We'll sort of take a look at some background context around this location, current conditions, the alternatives that we've explored, community input, and then present you with a recommendation and seek your policy direction on that.
So I will note, you do have 3 commissioners here in the room and Commissioner Willie will be joining us.
Okay, thank you. So the 2 prompts for our discussion are basically, do you concur with the staff recommendation? And then is there any additional information that you'd like to inform deliberation here? Okay, for a little bit of background. So this is the project description for Alexander Street from the adopted MSTIP 3F project funding allocation. And it extends from 178th Avenue to 192nd Avenue. This is really in the heart of Aloha. It is designed to be a complete street project, meaning that we will have both vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle facilities. And it's really intended to help support implementation of the Aloha Town Center designations here. We did a pretty significant study that I'll touch on here in just a moment that laid some groundwork for this effort here. And I would remind your board that there was a funding contribution in the MSTIP 3E program for preliminary design, and then a supplemental dedication or allocation rather in MSTIP 3F for the final design and construction. And in total, those funds come out to $23.7 million. So I mentioned the Aloha Tomorrow study. So this was really an effort to look at a town center plan for Aloha. It's really focused around the intersections of TV Highway and Alexander with 185th Avenue. So in that recommendation, or in the recommendations from that study, we had improve Alexander Street to create a community main street. You can imagine that TV Highway, it's a 5-lane arterial with railroad tracks on one side and development on the north. Not an ideal sort of main street, if you will. So we made the determination that Alexander was probably best suited for the neighborhood core street. Recommendations also included adding a bicycle and pedestrian crossing on 185th Avenue at Alexander Street. There currently is no opportunity for folks to ride through that on a bike or walk across there. And then we really want to create an improved walking environment for pedestrians as we anticipate future intensification and redevelopment of the town center area, which I'll note has actually started in earnest. There's a 4-story hotel that's just about to open right near the corner of 174th and Alexander Street. And then there's also the Bridge Housing Project, which is located, actually, that's at 174th and getting my numbers mixed up. So there's also a 4-story affordable housing development by Bridge Housing that's on Alexander, just outside this project scope area.
Well, I know Commissioner Willie in his former life as mayor of Hillsborough, and in my former life as a Metro councilor for this area, he and I are each very familiar with the work that went into the Aloha Reedville Town Center vision and into development of this Aloha Tomorrow study.
Yeah, it's been a long journey with multiple iterations, and it's really nice to see actual projects coming that are really implementing that planning work. And then the Aloha Tomorrow study included a conceptual design for Alexander Street that included a cycle track, which would be sort of a segregated bicycle facility. However, as our project team, led by Pat, have dug into the details, there are some pretty significant constraints and limitations that we hadn't identified. So we'll walk through those a little bit as we go through the presentation with you today, and happy to answer any questions about any of that.
Well, and in the intervening time, we have more experience about the success or not of cycle tracks, not just here in the county, but across the region, as I know you've all participated in various Metro different committees and subcommittee reviews.
Yep, indeed. Okay. So a few maps here to just kind of familiarize you with the context in the planning area. So the portion of Alexander, as I mentioned, it's between 178th and 192nd Avenues. We're just north of TV Highway here and paralleling it. And so moving on to the land use context. So part of the Aloha Tomorrow study also led to the designation of what we called the town center zoning or mixed commercial center, I forget what we called it. But there are, community core. Thank you. Some community core zoning designations, and you see those basically within the extents of this project between 178th and 192nd. And these are predominantly allowing mixed use development and encouraging ground floor retail, but also facilitating significant residential densities in there as well. This section of Alexander Street, or actually all of Alexander Street, is designated as a collector roadway in our adopted transportation system plan. So collectors are sort of the secondary streets, with arterials being the sort of most major roadways. So TV Highway and 185th, both arterials, Alexander then a collector. In our bikeway plan, it is currently designated as what's called a major street bikeway. And on a major street bikeway, the TSP says that a 6-foot bike lane or buffered bike lane is generally considered sufficient to accommodate cyclists. This area, the larger area that you can see in green on this slide, is considered a pedestrian and bicycle district. So it includes the town center, but also some additional areas to the north and to the east and south. And then in the plan itself, Alexander Street, the segment that we're looking at here, is designated as a streetscape overlay. So you can see on the slide, a streetscape overlay includes pedestrian features that are variable by context, but are likely to include things like wider sidewalks, street medians, narrower vehicle travel lanes and pavement widths, curb extensions, and on-street parking. So things that just lend to a more urban feel and environment, and hopefully help to slow traffic and really facilitate pedestrian activity.
I hope that in your documentation that it's documented clearly for our successors of changes such as at TV Highway and 185th, that ODOT had a project that they worked with you to remove the pork chops because they were considered unsafe for the pedestrians that frequent, particularly the bus lines that go east, west, north, and south. So I hope that 10 years from now, we don't end up with a proposal that says, well, gee, why don't we
We don't
put in
lose
support jobs?
We don't lose the institutional memory here.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Thought I'd bring in that
Yeah.
anecdotal.
good recall too. Thank you. So we generally will look at traffic data as a part of our projects and share that with you as well. So we actually have two segments of Alexander, one west of 185th, one east of 185th. And these vary quite a lot because, as I mentioned, right now there is no crossing of 185th allowed at Alexander. That's vehicular, bicycle, or pedestrian. So you'll notice that there's a substantial difference in the trip volumes east and west of 185th. East of 185th tends to have a little bit more commercial adjacency. West of 185th tends to be more residential, but there is also a significant retail cluster right at 185th there.
Could I ask a couple of things?
Mhm.
And I'm bouncing between this and the prior slide. First off, on this slide, I want to say very clearly that we are not in the business of trying to promote the future total trips.
Right.
This is just based off of taking population growth projections and using transportation models.
Mhm. Right.
I say that not because any of us need to hear it, okay? But I think we've been through some of these where we end up with some comment in the future, public comment in the future. Why are you making these efforts? Yes, exactly. So we're just trying to use these tools
Correct.
to understand what the future might bring so that we are making decisions today that will stand the test of time. But
Yes.
more, if I go back to the slide, realizing those numbers and looking at the proximity between TV Highway and 185th and Alexander at 185th, and I'm really familiar with the center median and the bollards and whatnot. Do you know if in Washington County there is a similar intersection spacing where you may already have traffic light syncing up so that if there was a traffic light at Alexander and 185th, plus the traffic lights at TV Highway, that they could be
Mhm.
orchestrated in concert? And if so, could you just let me know so I can try out that experience?
Mhm. Yes.
You don't have to have the answer
I was gonna say,
now,
yeah, I'll
but
take
this
that as a
caused
follow-up.
me to, seeing this information got me to think about it.
Evergreen at 105th.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. But ponder it and let me know, because what I know, especially because of ODOT's involvement, and we've got ODOT rail in the mix as well, that things can get kind of complicated.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure that as we provide you with direction for future implementation and tools,
Mhm.
we're mindful of how you may need the resources to go and study best practices in order to optimize a configuration that is somewhat atypical for us. That's all. I didn't mean it to sound so multi-part. It's just complicated.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Durham and Boone's Ferry and the heavy rail line might be another example.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's just as busy.
Nothing's easy. Pardon me? Nothing's easy.
No. Yeah, I think the easy stuff all got done a long time ago, right? Yeah, but it keeps our jobs very interesting. So again, I think the key takeaway on this slide was really, and as you pointed out, Chair, really well, that this is really just a projection based on traffic models and assumptions about land use. And so the estimate is that trips could increase by nearly 50% by 2040. And of course, we're also doing work, to your point, Chair, we're also doing a lot of work to try to encourage people not to have to take a vehicle everywhere. So trying to, build more capacity and interest in utilization of other alternative methods.
Yeah, but nonetheless, e-bikes and what are those scooters people use? They're very brave people with their helmets, those uni scooters and the other kind of scooters that are going like 30 miles an hour right next to me.
Mhm. Yes. This is a really busy slide, and I won't dwell on it for too terribly long. This is really just looking at the current conditions along Alexander Road, and I'll just highlight maybe one key takeaway are the green lines are where there are existing sidewalks. You can see there are not a lot of them. So one of the obviously key aims of this project will be to complete the pedestrian network along Alexander Street. And then, as I mentioned, and we'll see a slide actually of a Google Street photo, compliments of Google, thank you, where you'll see that there is currently no vehicle, bike, or pedestrian crossing at 180. So we're just going to take a little drive down the road, if you will. This is from the very western end of the project, and we're going to be looking east mostly here. So this is looking towards 192nd Avenue. And I wanted to highlight, we're turning to the right now and looking south down towards TV Highway. This is 192nd Avenue. You'll see a sidewalk there, and that was completed by the county using Urban Road Maintenance District funding, which you heard about earlier this morning from ERMDAC Chair Steinbergy. And so that's a project that we worked on. And then there will be a couple of other intersections along here as well where there are sidewalk projects planned connecting Alexander to TV Highway. So we're really looking at trying to stitch this town center together as much as we can right now. So going back, looking east again on Alexander, we're right here around 187th Avenue. And again, there is a sidewalk to be constructed on 178 or 187th rather, connecting TV Highway and Alexander coming up in 2026. And this is the 185th intersection. So as I mentioned, you can maybe make it out in the photo, but there's a concrete barrier island right in the middle of the intersection there that currently does not have crossings for pedestrians or bikes. It does facilitate vehicles turning or going southbound on 185th approaching TV Highway can turn left onto Alexander Street. And then of course you have right in, right out turns on Alexander, but again, no through movement on Alexander across 185th. So continuing east, this is at 182nd Avenue. And again, we'll have another sidewalk project on 182nd connecting TV Highway and Alexander, and expecting that to be completed at the end of 2027. I should say a couple of these projects are contingent on regional flexible funds and federal congressionally designated spending. We're sort of assuming those funds will all come through, but we'll keep you in the loop as we learn more. And then this is at the east end of the project at 178th Avenue. And again, you'll see on the right side of that slide there that there are some existing sidewalks that are recently constructed. Those were also constructed as part of a earned and then also gain share partnership, funding partnership to construct sidewalks on 187th Avenue between TV Highway and continuing all the way north to Johnson Street. We always take a look at conflict points. We looked at a project just a couple of weeks ago that had very few. This one has a whole bunch. There's one major intersection, which will be at 185th, a couple of minor cross-street intersections, and then you can see 57 existing driveways. As redevelopment occurs over time, hopefully we'll see fewer driveways, but really that's going to be dependent on how redevelopment occurs and when.
Is this like Cornell in relationship to?
More so, more driveways than Cornell, yeah, more closely spaced.
I'm just thinking about what we ended up with bicycle facilities.
Right.
Even on this display, what is the full length approximately? For context here, is this like a half a mile, a mile? I'm just trying to get a sense of the
I think the total length is approaching a half mile.
half a mile. Okay, thank you for context.
It's funny you asked that. I think I actually put a note in the presentation somewhere, but
It's okay.
yeah. Okay. So now we'll take a look at some alternatives that we've evaluated. In this case, we have three alternatives. Your policy requires us to bring you at least two. In this case, we did take a look at three. So the first is really what we call our just standard collector cross street or cross section. So that has two vehicle travel lanes, bike lanes, and then because of the urban context, we would also include on-street parking, which is not pictured in the standard drawing here, but that would increase the width of the roadway a little bit. And one of the key takeaways here is that it would require a minimum 76 feet of right-of-way if we included on-street parking on both sides of the roadway. You can see that the standard is a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the street, 6-foot bike lanes, and yeah, 76 feet with the on-street parking. Okay. So the second alternative is the cycle track option, and this is basically what was depicted in the concept drawings in the Aloha Tomorrow study. And so you can see the light green area, that would be the designated cycle track facility. This project has this cross-section has a combination of on-street parking and landscape strips in there, but still retains two vehicle lanes. And then the sidewalks in this case were 8 feet wide. This one requires a minimum 71 feet of right-of-way. And then the third alternative is looking at similar to the prior option, but rather than having the cycle tracks, we've actually just opted for wider sidewalks, 10-foot sidewalks, and then are recommending the option of bicycles actually traveling in the vehicle travel lanes. For context here, the standard speed limit would be 25 miles per hour. We're working with our traffic engineering team to explore alternatives to post this at 20 miles per hour. Counties are treated a little bit uniquely in that we don't have statutory ability to necessarily set a 20 mile per hour speed limit here. But we'll be taking a look at that. In this concept, you can hopefully make out on the slide there, we would have what are called sharrows. Those are the shared bicycle and vehicle lane markings. So it's the bike with the two little diamond points up above it. And what you see in this case, and I might go back just one second. So you'll notice on one side of this diagram, you see on-street parking. On the other side, you see a landscape strip. It's really very similar to what you see here. You would have alternating landscape strips and parking on either side of the roadway.
And you think you can achieve on-street parking given the number of driveways?
We can. We'll see a plan view as we go further in the presentation. It's not a huge number, but we think every space will be precious.
Yep.
Will that whatever you're going to show quantify the difference in on-street parking between those alternatives? Well, anyway, mention.
Yeah, no, I think the alternatives 2 and 3 would end up probably with a very similar amount of on-street parking.
Okay.
Okay, and then I think a key takeaway here, this requires 63 feet of right-of-way, so it does save a significant amount of width in terms of the roadway. And then this just shows you the three all together here. And then we did a comparison here, and again, we've played with different variations of this over the years. This latest iteration, instead of trying to assign numerical values, that seems to create a lot of confusion every time. So we've really tried to go with this little dot system so that one dot is what we would perceive to be the least suitable solution for each of the criteria that are outlined on the left, and 2 stars being the middle, and then 3 stars being the most suitable. And so of the 3 options here, you can see that the alternative 3, the shared use facility, we think achieves the best outcomes on a variety of the criteria that are evaluated here. And then I'll note at the bottom, the construction costs are actually not hugely different. Alternative one is about $1 million more, but the other two are almost the same or are the same. The right-of-way costs is where you'll start to see a pretty significant differential. In the alternative one, $6 million. Alternative two, the cycle tracks, $4 million. And then for the third alternative, the shared use, we're at $1.8 million. And the total cost, you can see, ranges from a low of 19.4 million for alternative three up to a high of 25.5 for alternative one. And back to our earlier mention of the total amount of dedicated funding is 23.7. So we could accommodate within our current anticipated funding allocation, either alternative two or three, but not alternative one. So community input, we had an online open house to look at design options, and that was done back in December of 2023. We focused on different variations of alternative two, which were the cycle tracks at that time. We had a total of 437 visitors. 25 of those left us provided feedback or responses, which included 2 phone calls. We had 8 who expressed general support for the project, 3 that were expressing concerns about the roadway width or impacts on property. There were 2 that were concerned about the proximity of the Alexander and 185th, or the TV highway intersections at 185th. And then 3 with concerns about tree removals and impacts, and then just 6 sort of general clarification questions. So to the recommendation, the staff recommendation is alternative 3, and that is the option with the shared vehicle and bike lanes. Again, with the anticipation that we're hoping we can find ways to post the speed limit there at 20 miles per hour rather than 25, which we think would further be conducive to the type of environment that we're trying to create in a town center with slower moving traffic and hopefully a better mix of bicycle and vehicular traffic. One of the challenges with cycle tracks is actually in an environment where you anticipate a lot of pedestrian activity, they can actually be a little bit more challenging for both the pedestrians and the cyclists to navigate with each other. And so this we think helps with a number of potential concerns here too. So a little bit more about why we've narrowed in on this alternative. So we do think that it probably best supports the Aloha Town Center vision for the pedestrian activity and bike activity that we're hoping to achieve with slow moving vehicle traffic. This does allow for the wider and more pedestrian friendly sidewalks than either the standard collector street or the concept plan with the cycle tracks allowed. Because of the number of cross streets and driveways, this segment really, in practical reasons, is just not well suited to a cycle track, in addition to the potential pedestrian conflicts that I mentioned earlier. This option also, of course, helps minimize property and building impacts. We want to try to be really sensitive as we're planning and building these projects, that we're working with the context that's there to the extent that we can. We want to try to minimize and limit displacement of community members and businesses here. And as I mentioned earlier, alternative one actually exceeds the allocated funding. In addition, the right-of-way varies currently along Alexander Street. As different development has occurred over time, we've gotten different right-of-way dedications based on the current standards in place at the time. So we have a real mishmash of different right-of-way widths along the way. But it averages about 55 feet wide. So as I mentioned earlier, alternative one is a 76-foot right-of-way. Alternative two at 71 feet would have some pretty significant impacts on just a limited number of properties, but would affect a significant number of properties less significantly. And then to avoid those most significant impacts, we are recommending that third alternative at 63 feet. There are a couple of places when we get to the plan view where you'll see that we're also proposing to shift the sidewalk to be adjacent to the roadway in limited sections so that we can avoid some pretty significant property impacts even in those specific areas. And that would eliminate some on-street parking capacity in those particular areas. And then looking at some potential changes around utility easements versus right-of-way in a couple of locations to help with some very specific mitigation opportunities. And then we are looking at a very targeted undergrounding of some overhead utilities that would help us to avoid an actual building, a commercial building removal.
This slide also got me wondering about in changing the configuration of the roadway, which in many places is just essentially a 2-lane width asphalt that runs towards a property line. No existing curb, no existing stormwater facilities.
Right.
Have you also contemplated in this any stormwater provisions that will need to be put in place through this project extent? Is that just included? I don't need to hear
Yeah,
all the.
no, that's just a standard part of our process. And actually you'll see when we get to the plan view too, we are in some of the landscape areas, we're actually recommending what are called LIDA wells. So low impact development approach. So actually allowing run water from the sidewalks and the streets to filter through these planted areas for some initial treatment before they go into the stormwater system.
Thank you.
Yeah, you saw earlier where we showed parking, landscaping, or swales. So it's in that same area that you'd see some of those.
All been
Ida
part of
swale
your
type stuff,
thinking.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
That's where Jackson School Road has that.
Yep.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. Okay. So to the street plan. So as I mentioned, there are a few areas where we're proposing to build the sidewalk adjacent to the street. And you can see those are sort of highlighted by the yellow boxes on the slide here. Hopefully you can make those out. And again, those are really designed to just try to help minimize specific impacts on some of the abutting properties there.
Really appreciate the consistency of having the 3 little segment box and the segment box. Really terrific.
Good.
Done very well.
That was our hope, was to create something that was followable. And then what I was pointing out here, you can see where the curbs bump out. Those would be the parking areas that we have identified so far. And then you can see some areas that are in line with the parking, but are sort of that gray dots.
Coconut.
Those would be the LIDA swales and or the planter strip areas. And again, you zoom in real close, you can pick out lots of driveways in there too, of course. So, and then one thing I would say too is that as redevelopment occurs, we'll have opportunities as conditions of development approval. And I want to be careful here because things have changed a lot with middle housing rules now, but in most cases, I think we would have opportunities to have the developers dedicate additional right-of-way and to construct the sidewalks and modify the roadway to add additional on-street parking or street landscape buffers as those properties can redevelop in the future. And again, we're going west to east here, so we're moving along now. We're looking at 187th is the street in the middle of this here too. So you'll notice another location where we're proposing to bump the sidewalk out to avoid a building impact.
Will that approach look pretty natural, like as a walker?
Yeah, yeah, and you can see in the drawings here, it looks
it looks like it
tried to, yeah, we tried to make the transitions fairly smooth as you're sort of shifting, from side to side.
It's not going to be like I've been on streets or walking next to streets where it's like, oh, now we're over here, like we're playing Frogger.
Right.
This is not going to feel like
no.
Okay.
Or it's like a 90-degree angle.
Yeah. I have one in my neighborhood like that. Yeah, and it's right at a swale too, which could be a little bit of a tripping hazard as you're trying to navigate that. And again, here, this is now looking at 185th. I want to highlight here that we are proposing marked and signaled pedestrian crossings here. And so, Chair, to your comment earlier, yes, we would definitely need to coordinate with ODOT for potential timing of a signal at this location. Even if it's just a pedestrian signal, we want to ensure that we're not going to create challenges with traffic backing up across TV Highway. And you can see on here, I mentioned earlier some significant building impacts. The building that's just to the right and on the south side of Alexander at that crossing, that's the Ace Hardware store. So that's a building that would have a pretty major impact really under any of the three scenarios without the option of moving the sidewalk closer to the roadway, at least in this interim condition. And then closing out, moving down towards 178th Avenue here. You can see a lot less intensity of the development here. So back to the recommendation slide again. So just showing you that alternative 3 is that recommendation that we're bringing forward to you. And we're back to our discussion prompts. And if you want me to jump back to any slides, please let me know.
All righty. Commissioners. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you for the presentation. Very good and very detailed. Are there any thoughts about mitigating speed problems, trying to keep it 25? I mean, you know, everybody wants speed humps and all those things.
Right.
But I'm just wondering if you're concerned at all about that piece.
Yeah, we definitely have options. This is a collector, so we don't typically allow speed
Right.
calming on collector roadways. But I do think that given what we're trying to achieve in this particular environment, I think that we can give ourselves exceptions to a policy potentially here with your guidance. And so I think that is something that we would be mindful of. I think another option could be at some of the intersections, we'll have bulb outs. Again, those are things that are visual cues to help slow traffic down. And then we could even potentially look at some raised crossings. And there are various treatments that I think we'd like to explore.
I'm only concerned from the standpoint of the sharing of the lanes with the bikes and the narrow features. I'm just.
Commissioner Treese, you were taking my whole point.
I'm very sorry.
And you guys got to the point of design
A
features.
mind map.
I got my hand up first, Jason.
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, to your point though, and I'm hearing this already happening, like there are design features that could be used to push the slower speed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Concern around
Even
30,
those-
I mean, the difference between 30 or 25 and 20 when you're sharing with bicycles.
Right.
I mean, at 30, you're kind of like coming over the top of them.
Mhm.
I know the proposal's
You'd be coming over
25.
the top of me, I can guarantee you.
Yeah. I mean, that's my, so anyway, it's the same thought. I just think that using as many design features as you can to address Commissioner Treese's point would be good.
Right.
Yeah, and I
Well-
also, oh, sorry, I was just
Go
gonna add that, you know, because those sidewalks are 10 feet wide to someone, you know, a bike rider that's not comfortable
They're
in
gonna
the
be up.
street
Yeah.
could move up onto.
The leisurely rider,
Yeah.
Mhm.
the non-transport.
Or less experienced. Yeah.
This is a time for me to put in a plug to thank, I assume, the city of Hillsborough for installing permanent speed boards. They're very small, right on Main Street in each direction, just after the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And it's not necessarily on every day, which is good. I find it very eye-catching, though I recognize I'm a rule follower. But I'm that person that does the speed limit all along Jenkins Baseline, Main Street. And people pass me in the center lane because they want to go faster than the speed limit. But it's there to encourage us to do the 25-mile-an-hour speed. They're very sleek signs. There's no solar on it. There are no electrical lines. I didn't notice them installing them.
Mhm.
I drive that way every day, so hats off to them.
Mhm. Yeah, and we've implemented those on a number of streets, and they prove to be pretty effective. And I think to your point, we've got some neighborhoods actually as part of our neighborhood streets program, traffic calming program, where the HOA actually purchases a sign and then they actually move it around to different locations in the neighborhood so that it's just sort of building awareness in different locations. And then also, as you say, I think having it operative sometimes and not other times also just kind of helps.
This is the
Hold some awareness.
sleekest box I've ever seen of
Yeah.
all the ones I've
They are
seen
very
deployed
small.
across the county.
Yeah.
So I was just building off of
Mhm.
Commissioner Teresa's comment that bounced around. So, any other commissioner questions or comments?
Alternative 3 seems like the only real option. Oh.
Oh, Commissioner Fry, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was gonna, thank you, Chair. I was gonna ask a quick question. Stephen, could you remind us, is this design suggestion from the staff recommendation? Um, is this, I don't remember a similar design coming to this board. But I try to jog my memory over the weekend to try to remember. Is this a new design?
Mhm.
And how many streets in Washington County with the limitations or some of the um, sort of challenges that you've explained throughout this presentation have this similar design?
This is, as far as I'm aware, this would be the first street that we've actually tried this on. And I think that this is really a combination of just the environment that we're trying to create here is quite unique for us in the unincorporated parts of the county. So I think it's really the confluence of those multiple factors, given that we're dealing with some on-the-ground constraints, but really also thinking about the type of environment that we're hoping to create for our pedestrians and cyclists.
Is there, uh, I think you're looking for a board thumbs up, but then I imagine, what's the next step? Let me look. After this today, we give you the thumbs up um, recommendation. Are you gonna come back to get a sort of approval? Because I think it might be I think it might be worth exploring if there has been some challenges that existed within communities that implemented this design, and what are some of those lessons learned that we could avoid? Because I'm not sure this neighborhood, this design might be conducive, but I live here, and um, so I might also be tunnel vision, just putting it for the record, transparency purposes. So I don't want to sort of say no, but I also want us to go eyes wide open. If there are some down the road challenges, um, that we can know some of those challenges, and to use Commissioner Trees' word that she used that I really liked is to mitigate some of those challenges then too.
Well, she was talking about specifically mitigating speed,
I'm
vehicular
using,
speed.
I'm borrowing that word. I said I like the word, so to borrow that, what are the,
You can have it.
So let
I'll
me
share
go
with you.
back to where this has been out. This whole area has gone through the Aloha Reedville Town Center vision work back in 2014. Then the follow-up to that, the 2017 Aloha Tomorrow study. And there were multiple open houses through those two programs. So this is the stage where our staff has examined all of the zoning and has gone through the whole community engagement process on multiple designs. We've gotten the report out here. So we are now at that final stage of here are the final options, and the board is weighing in its final decision for the particular design that staff is directed to come to us for. So after this direction today, there is no further next step for the board. All of the studies have been done. All of the mapping out of alternatives have been done.
Now it's about money and getting it done.
Yep.
And I might add, maybe to address the commissioner's question too, this would be a similar, I think, design to what you see in most of the downtown areas in most of our communities. And I'm thinking specifically of Tigard.
Yeah.
Is very much Tigard Main Street was redone in this way. In Hillsborough, the main streets, the one-way segments of the streets in downtown are designed in the same way. So I think it's fairly consistent with the kind of more urban downtown environment that we're hoping to create here. And I understand certainly Alexander doesn't look and feel that way today. So we really are trying to build in the infrastructure to help accommodate that more urban downtown feel future.
I think I was at that 2014 meeting. Interesting stuff.
Anything else, Commissioner Fye? All right.
And I
so-
learned the term sharrows.
Yeah.
That's a new one. Thank you.
Okay, so are the board members thumbs up on the alternative 3 recommendation? Okay.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anyone express any further need to inform the deliberation. I think we are done.
Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Terrific. So we've been going since 1:15. I would recommend that we take our 15-minute break and come back at 3:15 to pick back up with board and leadership communication. Thank you.
Welcome back, Commissioners. Back to you, Chair Harrington.
Okay, thanks, and welcome back from the break, everyone. We have board and leadership communication next. Who would like to go first? Go ahead, Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go first since I'm online. And oh, I see Diane. Hi, you're online as well. Welcome. Um, I'm looking forward. I'll start off since I said Diane's name, Clean Water Services. I'm looking forward to the learning session and got my binder and highlighted and some notes, so I'll be ready for Friday. In terms of board update, I just want to give a shout out to Ann Albert and Marnie Kyle for their leadership in meeting with the Five Oaks Museum board chairs, board members, and the leadership team. Um, I think as we're aware, in November, everything was fine when we had the board meeting at the Five Oaks because there were 3 grants that were pending for the museum to receive in December. December was a holiday. Um, so while in celebration mode, got the news that the 3 grants that were pending were no longer gonna pan out, which is why they're in this predicament of a financial hardship. Obviously, fundraising happens in spring for the museum, and they can apply grants while they're in sort of a um, on layoff and closed. But there is a significant collection of objects, over 10,000. I think you've seen some of the materials Anne and Marnie has been shared with you all. And I think the board update I want to give in this particular situation is to say, I appreciate Marnie and Anne and the work they're doing, and I appreciate the suggestion that they put in that email. Um, but I want you all to know that the museum team and the leadership and the board members are working hard to put together a proposal to send to the board and Chair Harrington and all of us to review and to see what we can do to navigate this situation. So I just wanted to put that plug out there to say they're working on a proposal to figure out what is um, what does this look like in terms of long term, short term, and in the immediate? And that's all I have. I think there might be. Okay. And then I have, in terms of board update for committees I represent on our board, in terms of decisions and board positions, we do have WCCC next week. But the agenda item is full of informational items, and I won't take up too much of your time. I know you had a busy day today, so I will conclude and pause if there's any questions around any of the projects.
On WCCC, or any of those informational items, long lead ones that we would benefit from a heads up on?
I didn't see any that caught my attention, but I will certainly review again and send an email to you all if I think is anything. But I'm happy to take anything that you're interested in, Chair Harrington, that I should send an email in collaboration with the staff.
Nope, that's your liaison role, not mine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
And since Commissioner Fye made mention, at least, if not, I haven't read the email yet because I've been in these meetings all day. I guess, Mr. Moss, if you could take that email and put it into the work session packet for the public record, since it was mentioned and referred to, that would offer us appropriate protections. Who would like to go next?
I can do that because it's, I think, things can be relatively short on my side too. last week was a fairly quiet week, so it was kind of nice. I did meet with Rebecca from Aging and Veterans and got an update there. I hadn't been able to make their last couple of meetings, so I was asking for an update. It's always good to hear what our veterans group are doing to try and get out in front of certainly our Washington County veterans and get them to engage a little bit more. And with that, we've got there's a veterans pickleball group that gets together. They played Sunday from 4 to 6, and yeah, that's all organized. It's free for that couple of hours. So the pickleball court there in Beaverton does a good job of donating that time, and they're going to start meeting on the first Sunday of every month. So at least I'll get exercise 2 hours a month by playing pickleball, and then hurt for 2 days.
Can I ask how you're feeling today?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. Stay in your own lane. So tomorrow, right, Dale? Yeah, that's right. So tomorrow I do have a meeting with the auditor, and I think that's going to be a follow-up to the audit presentation on MSTIP. So that will be a good conversation. We have, of course, I have a fair board meeting tomorrow night at 4:30. We'll get a little bit more of a snapshot of what the fair is going to look like here in 25, and also just how things are going on out there. I will be attending the Pacific University's 175th anniversary celebration that's at the Reeser. And so that is, when is that? That is Thursday night. And so last night, because again, I'm my wife's Uber driver for her presentations with Family Justice Center to the city councils. I was in Cornelius last night and heard a presentation on the TV highway study. I was going to put Nafisa on the hotspot there for a minute, but then I realized that we're going to have the same presentation next week, so I might cut you a little slack there. But
I appreciate it. I need it for today.
it's yeah, it'll be an interesting presentation, so I'll just hold off on that, and we'll see how that works next week. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Good go.
Okay. I met with DA Barton on 29th last Wednesday. Thursday went to the NAMI peer support celebration event. So there were hundreds of peer support folks from the 3 counties. NAMI of Washington County was hosting it in OMSI, and actually Representative Salinas was the main speaker, and it was just a really fun time to celebrate and connects to, frankly, I think the workforce of the future for some of our behavioral health, mental health teams. And so that was exciting to see. And then also attended that same day, the Sherwood Chamber Awards celebration. The other thing that day was the JCPAC meeting, and at that, Chair Harrington was also in attendance for much of it. We got a presentation from Washington County Kids. There was some detail that they shared, and then a very interesting discussion of a systems review that's going to be happening with some grant money that we recently were awarded, and you may all recall, but the RFK Community Alliance, I believe, is helping us with the technical review of systems. And that was pretty exciting. There's going to be a lot more information coming out about that, and will really help us. They were very clear that it is not an audit. It is they're going to be helping us do a self-assessment. And I thought that was a very good perspective on how to be thinking about the work that is happening. And then there was some discussion about the next 2-year plan that we have to produce for I believe, the Department of Education and the state. Yep. So that was a summary of that meeting very quickly. Met with a Tiger Tualatin School District board member at her request over the weekend. The Region 1 Act happened yesterday evening. just some real quick highlights there. They're going to be looking at doing some moving back to in-person meetings, hopefully, if they can find an ODOT facility to pull that off. There was a lot of discussion about some really significant work ODOT has done around identifying priority investment areas and what they're calling hotspots. So this is using a whole bunch of different lenses to sort of identify where major issues in the transportation system are. And they're the kinds of things you would expect, and just many factors. We had Washington County had two that are in that sort of significant hotspot category. 99W through Tigard is one, and then the entirety or most of the length of TV Highway. I'm sure that's a surprise to absolutely nobody here. The last thing highlighted was that there's starting to be traction, and there was some briefing on this related to jurisdictional transfers, one in Tigard of Hall Boulevard and the other in Hood River. And there's bills, and these were briefly mentioned, bills in the legislature currently that support both of those, but they're really looking at it in the Region 1 Act, and I think the OTC are really looking at what is the model that should be used to sort of evaluate these things and address them as they come up, because these are just two of hundreds of these. So that's an update on Region 1 Act. I met with Under Sheriff Cook yesterday and also did a 2-hour site visit to Community Action for some board member orientation and a site visit. Wednesday of this week in the evening, the Welcome Home Coalition is going to be doing the private screening of No Place to Grow Old. So I'm going to be attending that. Thursday, have a one-on-one with the CWS CEO. And then I'm going on a tour of Scoggins Valley Park at the request of our facilities team. So that is what I got going on this week.
You're doing the Scoggins Valley Park this week, next week?
This Thursday morning.
Oh. Well,
Must be an early.
hope the weather holds up. For you.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, that's right.
We'll see. I'm sure the weather may change those plans.
Yeah,
Not that early in the morning, though.
it's pretty cool.
That's great. So this past week, I had a conversation about economic development and Metro with Metro Councilor Ashton Simpson and what economic development means in relationship to Metro. And I've actually asked for a follow-up meeting with you, Commissioner Willie, just to talk about that discussion and bring it forward. That same afternoon, I went on a walk with Congressman Earl Blumenauer over the Earl Blumenauer Bridge. So that was, and it was to really discuss the formation of the PSU Institute that I've talked about here before. And I'll be seeing him again next week when he tours the CAT with some of the PSU folks. So a special call out to Marnie, her team, for making that happen.
That's an interesting pedestrian bridge across. That's the one across 84, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right at Lloyd Center.
What a connectivity thing that, I mean, initially you're thinking, wow, that looks like a boondoggle to me, but it's very cool. I mean,
It's hard to get around that area on
yeah,
foot
it's
without
exactly
it.
right. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool.
And there were a lot of people going back and forth.
Mhm.
So on Friday, I went to the Elmonica groundbreaking at Elmonica Station. And that affordable housing was funded by the Affordable Housing Bond. The speaker were Margaret Salazar from REACH and Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici. Chair Harrington spoke there, did a great job about what Washington County's look is around affordable housing. We also heard from Metro Councilor Juan Carlos Gonzalez and Beaverton City Councilor John Duger. And so it was a really kind of it takes a village type of groundbreaking. It was cold though, so just saying that. The right following that, I went over to Willow Creek and I spoke at the celebration of the newest graduating class of the Quick Start Semiconductor Training Program. And this is the program that we have supported with ARPA dollars. And it's basically a 2-week, very intensive program that takes people from very little experience in the semiconductor manufacturing world to being ready for entry-level positions in different locations around. And it was eye-opening to see how excited these people are. And they were from probably 18, 19 years old to a person there in their 60s. So it was a nice wide breadth of people. It also has a focus on our BIPOC community, and that was represented there as well. So I was pleased to see that. This last week, yesterday, we had the election process for the AOC District 8 team that runs those meetings and holds responsibility there. The new District 8 chair will be Multnomah County Commissioner Julia Brim Edwards, and the vice chair will be Clackamas County Commissioner Ben West. We're in a rotation, so we won't be on that docket until I believe it's 2 years out. So I also committed to staying on the legislative committee. It's important that our district have the votes that we need to have on that committee. So we had a vacancy there, staying there. We do have a vacancy for District 8 on the AOC membership committee. There's going to be further discussion about whether or not we need to actually fill that seat. On this Thursday, I'm going to be attending the Westside Economic Alliance Transportation Committee meeting. They're going to be talking about MISTIP, and I'm interested to hear what that discussion will be. And then Thursday afternoon, I'm headed over to Oregon City to visit the Metro South Transfer Station as part of my responsibilities on RWAC. So I am also attending the 175th anniversary of Pacific University. And Friday will be the CWS learning session. I'm interested in that. I also did, Commissioner Fye talked about Five Oaks. Michael Panhorst reached out to me about talking about the funding needs for the museum. I will be talking to him, but I want to make sure I'm briefed before that. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. I have a few things to come back to on JCPEC and the RFK grant and the program. Following the discussion at that meeting, we asked for a briefing of some kind to this board. So how that is done, either through an email or one-on-one briefings or work session, is TBD. It's not, doesn't fit your within a month kind of methodology, but sometime that would prove you, yeah, okay. Ish, I like that. We'll go with the ish part. Back on your mention of Scoggins Park, more specifically towards the campground and visitor center proposal. I know I join my colleagues in really appreciating the work that staff has been doing in planning those facilities out and securing funds. I had late last year asked Ms. Angie about the status of our hearing back from THPRD. She followed up with the general manager, Doug Menke. Despite our laying things out in a memo, it's my understanding that we still haven't received any status update or memo back from them. I had
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, I verbally said, no, they're not, or he verbally shared with me, no, they're not moving forward, but I had asked for that in writing versus just the verbal, and he is not, that we don't have that.
Yep. So I chose to wait. I had contemplated asking for us to give direction in our board meeting today to direct the CAO to take that $1 million and put it towards Scoggins. But I figured I'd wait until board communication today and we would get the report out here. So I think for next week, I would like to propose that we have a minute order of us directing Ms. Angie to take that earmark of $1 million, get it back towards the Scoggins Valley Campground and Visitor Center project set. Because we know construction costs are only going up. And Metro had already pre-approved those dollars towards the campground. And so,
The verbal response is enough for me.
but that way we can weigh in formally and get it done through a minute order.
Could I just respond to?
Only if you don't use up my 2 minutes.
I would, verbal is not enough for me. You talk mine.
You want it written?
Yes, I do.
Minute order does get written down.
Well, that's true.
Okay, now that we're clear on that, I had my annual interview with our Washington County financial auditor. I forget about this every year. They have to remind me every year. This goes under other duties as assigned as the chair that is not written down anywhere. But she's asked me every which way but sideways about the potential for fraud. So
They're doing their due diligence.
Yep. So done that again. So I had a really useful one-on-one face-to-face with Clackamas County Chair Craig Roberts. So I'll be following up with staff to see how we can arrange a tour for him of our two CAP facilities, a briefing and a tour maybe of one or two of those sites, as well as time with our senior staff, particularly from HHS Behavioral Health, about all things sobering and substance use treatment. He also had questions about our 911 center and WACA, and so I have an AR to follow up with him as well. I learned a couple of more things about jail design from him and his experience, as well as how class and comp has to be done in market. Anyway, to finish up real quick, as part of the follow-up from my participating on the OJD AOC Joint Task Force last year, there was going to be a subsequent committee to look at the process that is used statewide, looking at courthouses. Well, that's been dialed back to now look at just AOC stuff. But I get feedback from both ends of the spectrum. On one hand, we as a county, we were in the queue with the 08 study. Then the county didn't actively participate in the 2016 effort. So we were told when we wanted to go back in for the planning dollars that we had to get in line, and we've been in line through the process ever since. Yet the state is saying the way the process is supposed to work, if you don't have your local match, which Washington County did not have in 2016, didn't have financial readiness, then you should be allowed to come back in without any harm. How does that happen and not be sent to the back of the line? I don't understand. Nonetheless, we're going to look at how the process works just in utilizing AOC resources. OJD is, they were worried that people were misinterpreting doing a whole nother assessment again, as opposed to looking at, they have a lot of information now about the 36 counties, the 48 courthouses, and when they were built and state of affairs. So anyway, I'm back on another committee. So there's that. And I've used up my 5 minutes. Leadership communication, Ms. Angie.
Okay, thank you, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. Since two commissioners mentioned it, I know Clerk Moss will be adding it to the packet. I do want to just expand on the Five Oaks email that was in your inbox, which you may or may not have read yet. So let me give an outline of that email for you. So last week, Marnie Kyle and Ann Ober met with the Five Oaks Museum board members. The meeting was very productive. The really state where they're at is Five Oaks is desperately low on cash flow and do not have a clear path forward to stabilize the museum, looking at other sources of funding. Five Oaks is expected to close this month. The closure of Five Oaks will set off transitions in our building agreement with the nonprofit. The building is set to transition to the county first, with an option to maintain the building and its collection as a museum. Should the county determine it does not have the resources to maintain that service, I want to underscore our current budget issues. Staff is our understanding and our opinion is we do not have the ability to run that facility as a museum, given the budget direction that your board has authorized me to move forward with to the departments. The building would revert to the Portland Community College. To that
Operation or ownership?
The building would go to the Portland Community College, so the ownership of the building. To that end, staff have,
Operation and ownership are being combined into one?
no,
So
no.
we had an agreement in the 1980s that was signed in the 80s that talked about and contemplated the ownership of the facility. It's actually on PCC land. The museum itself, the physical structure is owned by Five Oaks until they don't run a museum. At that point, the reversion goes to the county. If the county doesn't run a museum, it then reverts to this back to the school for the full structure. The interior, all the items inside of it will revert to us because they are our records retention requirements. There's a lot of boxes of papers.
Is this email the extent of the briefing that the Board of Commissioners will be getting?
We can bring it back at next week's meeting. Happy to talk about it in more depth. Or in a future meeting as I look at Kevin and he throws me daggers for over committing the agenda.
I don't think we're talking the same.
No,
What was
you
your
went
question?
right to an action and I asked a question if this was the extent.
This is currently the extent of the briefing.
Okay, well, I'll just say I'm going to request a one-on-one briefing from myself.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so there is more content in the email, and so if members of the public, because I think we jumped all the way to conclusion, members of the public would like to view that, Clerk Moss is going to be updating the packet to include the email that your board has received. Moving next to, and sorry,
I think the moral of this story is when information comes into our email box on a meeting day, best not to try and refer to it during board communications. Thank you.
so next, yesterday evening, staff had held a listening session with about 30 representatives from CBO organizations. And this was based in light of the recent federal announcements and activities. It was a really great conversation, and one of the unexpected outcomes of that conversation is really sharing amongst CBOs of how they are working through the current state, whether it's questions from their from community or clients that they're serving around immigration or federal funding. And we have committed to having ongoing listening sessions during these unprecedented times, just to continue that sharing amongst us as community partners. I will also note a reduction in hours, specifically in our law library. This is related to staffing. We foresee this at least through the month of February and potentially within the foreseeable future. We have 3 FTE within our law library. As a reminder, the law library is a state-funded program that Washington County operates. We did have a retiree. Congratulations on the life transition on January 31st. Our retiree will be planning to return to in March as a variable hour employee. Our law librarian is working on hiring a few more variable hour staff as funding allows to try to maintain our current service level. However, staff need to get work done besides just the open hours. So Erin Calvert is working with the law library on consistency of hours moving forward. So more information will be shared with your board as we know more. But starting this week, the law library will provide both in-person and remote services on Mondays and Tuesdays from 8 to 5. And on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, they'll provide in-person and remote services from 8 to noon, and will only provide remote services from 12 to 5. The schedule change will be posted on their website, so no one has to remember this, but this is just for Commissioner Snyder, the library is one of those services that many times when we do change hours, we do have some of our community members actually express concern. And with any service interruption, we do try to alert the board of this change. And with that, that concludes my update.
I'm sitting here racking my brain. I know that we've had presentations on the law library previously, but I was having trouble remembering what is the minimum requirement from the state. And I can't remember. So between now and proposed budget time, I'm going to have to dust that off. Oh, you know the answer? Great.
The answer is it depends. That's not super helpful. The answer is that each county should provide a law library, but what that looks like is very different.
Yeah.
And so some counties are only able to provide law library services for a very few hours per week. And we are, of course, trying to provide as much service as possible, but running into some funding issues. So we'll continue to work on that. And as Ms. Angie said, provide you with updates on hours and any changes to staffing. But with the unknown funding in the legislature right now, Amy Gregory, the law librarian, is trying to be really frugal with the dollars. And that's why we're not refilling the position. We're just going to do some variable hour work to try to keep that service level as it is now.
So it sounds to me like you're trying to ensure that in business hours, Monday through Friday, you have access. That access could be remote,
right?
But you're trying to ensure that we have in person to the physical location collection of
Correct.
materials available other days of the week.
Yes, as much as possible. Yeah. And then we'll be able to assist remotely as well. So yes. Okay.
I mean, short of, we got the GR briefing today. Right. We're having to do heavy lifting just to get them to have a work group.
Right. Yep.
So, yeah. Whew, it's a lot. Anything else?
No, just a reminder, and I've already informed your board that I will be traveling for ICMA once again. My routine statement, the county does not pay any of these expenses. They are either paid by ICMA or myself. During this time, I will be attending the North Carolina City and County Management Association and also touring some of the impacted communities and discussing emergency management and how can we scale the learning of cities and counties across the country as our events become more frequent and share those resources of learnings differently. And Ober will be serving as interim during that time.
I think you've done a terrific job. repeatedly over these many months of letting us know what the plans are, the coverage. I'm guilty of not remembering to pull out my tools where I remind myself when your planned trips are. But you've given us the information to know when the trips are coming up, and you always ensure we're in good hands.
Well, I'll continue to do that because sometimes week by week, I forget where I'm supposed to be.
Well, keep up the good work there. Courtney.
Chair Harrington, I did want to thank you all for your time with us today. I feel like you've probably heard from me and legal enough for one day, but
I think we feel very well served.
yes, we appreciate your attention and your thoughtful direction and leadership on these thornier issues. At the sake of overstaying my welcome, I did want to circle back to something you said earlier, Chair Harrington, about, there not being an order or written order rescinding the federal memo. I know you've received communication and about the TRO, the temporary restraining order that was issued in the AG case that was issued on Friday. Just yesterday, the DC Circuit Court, the US District Court of DC also issued a second TRO, this time in response to the lawsuit, the complaint that was filed by the nonprofit groups, the first lawsuit that was filed. So we now have two TROs freezing implementation of the memo, rescinded any implementation of those priorities that were stated there. It is notable that in both cases, the judges explicitly said they felt the TROs were necessary because of the conflicting messaging, the rescission but the pause is not paused. So they actually.
I'm reacting to the external forces.
Yes.
That we have no control, let alone influence over, but just trying one more time.
Yeah.
If the OMB is going to issue a memo and then you're going to verbally say it's rescinded, you might want to follow it up with a memo with a big red stamp that says rescinded.
Right, and then get communication across, federal government is large, but get your communication in line. So just wanted to let you know, there are now two TROs. So we'll continue to work through that. Both appear to be in place until a full briefing and hearing on the merits of each complaint, which is very similar in both cases, can be heard for more permanent relief as may be warranted. That's it for me.
Well, and I forgot to mention efficiently in my 5 minutes that I went to Congresswoman Bonamici campaign funders thank you event last night, and she spoke to these being the very chaotic times and lawsuits being one avenue that is being pursued, but also certain members of even the Republican Party being displeased and voicing that displeasure about threatening the separation of powers between the three branches of government. So, and really urging us to take care of ourselves, but also keep fighting against this chaotic, sometimes senseless activity. So anyway, a little hope. Ms. Danaguchi-Dennis.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Harrington and Board of Clean Water Services. So the Clean Water Services team is preparing for winter weather operations. There is a winter weather advisory in effect from midnight tonight until noon tomorrow. Snow is expected, accumulations potentially up to 1 inch with up to 2 inches in the hills. So the team is ready to make our call for what's going to happen with Clean Water Essentials on Thursday evening from 5 to 8. And of course, we have the board learning on Friday and also another Clean Water Essentials at 10 a.m. on Saturday. So we're hoping those won't be disrupted, but we'll continue to monitor and be prepared. So I think we have to get our winter clothes out for the next few days. Other than that, the Clean Water Services team is doing well. They're preparing budgets and working forward. So thank you.
Great. I don't know if you caught it from the board business meeting today, but the notice needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Our CWS board meeting on Friday is not, the word training shouldn't be used as part of the noticing because it doesn't meet the ORS rules for training.
I will
So
talk to
when
the
I, when I did my board announcements, I made sure to not express that word, though it was in the posted packet.
Thank you.
Well, I think we need to revisit. It needs to be clear. It's a board meeting.
Oh,
Yep.
I was gonna make comments about that on Friday. I've already talked to the chair about it, just how it's labeled.
Yep. So.
yeah, I just want to say to Courtney and your team, we have seen you a lot lately, but they're just communicate. They're doing a great job, and they give us lots of good options and communicate well. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, I will.
Yep. Our business partners never wear out their welcome. No department wears out a welcome. You're all doing tremendous public service work. Great. I think that's it for today. So our work session is hereby adjourned. See you next week.